Let's blow this up.
All right, look alive, Bomb Squad. We are back for a special Tuesday edition of Let's Blow This Up Live. I am your host, Jason Sircone. And if you joined us last Wednesday, you're well aware of the technical difficulties that we had with my guest, Wylie McGraw. Unfortunately, that conversation, as we had planned, scheduled, and advertised, was not able to take place, which was a real shame because we got off to a good start, but then Wylie's Wi-Fi connection went batshit, and here we are. Going for number 2, but we're going to get it right. We did a little bit of sound testing before we kicked this off. Everything went well. Now I'm going to bring Wylie back up here onto the camera here in a moment. I'm hoping he's still there. That was the joke I just made. I was worried that when we start the intro music, he's going to disappear. He's still there. I see him waiting. But before I do that, I just want to let everybody know in the Bomb Squad, if you're watching, please feel free to participate in the conversation, drop some comments, ask some questions throughout this wonderful conversation I'm about to have with Wylie. And a quick apology for 2 weeks ago now. I had some technical glitches on my end that I was able to rectify. So going forward, as long as we're not having any very, very awful rainstorms here in Pittsburgh, which was what was happening during my conversation with Jan Ditchfield, we should be good to go. I feel horrible even putting that out into the universe again after what happened last week. But all things considered, we got Wylie back with us again, and we are going to dive into some great conversation tonight. So without further ado, allow me to welcome back to Let's Blow This Up Live, Mr. Wylie McGraw. How you doing, Jason? Sir?
All right. I'm holding out for it.
Yeah, so I said we were going to try this again. We're going to hope for the best. If we get an hour under our belt, we're going to be in good shape. So because we are now experienced with potential technical issues, here we are once again. For those that weren't with us last week, they know that you and I are both sharing a glass of whiskey. This is one of the common denominators that has brought us together since we did meet back in, I believe, 2021. And once again, I am drinking the
Glendrona.
Now I want to make sure that it's the Glendrona, correct?
Yep.
That's how it's pronounced. This was a gift from Wylie when I was a guest on his podcast, Wise Words and Whiskey with Wylie. That was a great conversation. I highly recommend everybody go check that out. We had a lot of fun, and we got to sip some good whiskey. So, Wylie, as was the call on my part last week, you can do this whiskey much more justice than me. So I'd like you to let the crowd know what I've got in my glass and then share what you're consuming this evening for our conversation, my friend.
Absolutely, brother. Again, thanks for having me. I'm happy we're finally getting some smooth seas here with the technology, but sometimes
I'm sitting here like this for 60 minutes.
Yeah, well, we don't even need to do that. I think we're going to be all right. So
I think so too.
But you just roll with the punches. I think just real quickly before we get the whiskey is sometimes life, it just doesn't work out the way you hoped it for, and it just sometimes compounds. And I think people get lost in the compounding, and they let that take them down a rabbit hole of anger and frustration, and then things just break. And then we're stuck in a space of like, now how do I get out of this hole? So I love that we can laugh and roll with it, and people that are listening can potentially use that as an opportunity for them to, remember this moment when they're having bad experiences and realize sometimes it's about how you react to those experiences that really make or break who you are. So for you and I'm glad we're here. But nevertheless, without further ado, that Glendrona is one of my favorite because as a single malt Scotch guy, and you're a bourbon guy, so the differences in the whiskey, I think for people to understand a little bit is that bourbons themselves are usually 51% corn mash or more. That's what makes it a bourbon, qualifies it as a bourbon whiskey itself. And they're usually made in the United States. Like Scotch whiskeys are Scotland based. So everything that is you hear as a Scotch is made in Scotland. And then you have, of course, your Irish whiskeys, which of course, Irish whiskeys in Ireland. Then different types. I mean, it's a big field, an amazing craft. But tonight you're sipping the Glendrona, which is a Gaelic word. And it's a specific region of Scotland that has a unique flavor profile. So your flavor profile you're drinking is more of the sweeter, like summer fruits, honey depth with spices and oak. You get that really, really overarching candied mouthfeel. And a mouthfeel is just basically how your mouth feels when you have whiskey in it. It's almost like coating your mouth. And I really like that one because it's aged 12 years in sherry casks, which imparts that sweet flavor into it as well. It's very vanilla-y, creamy, so it's a very enjoyable whiskey. So even a beginner can actually break that open, even though it's, you know, it's not too high of a price point as far as cost, but they can break it open and really appreciate it because it's not overpowering. It doesn't kick you in the face and burn your throat like some of these more potent whiskeys do.
Right.
So that's the one you're drinking. That's why I got it for you specifically, because I knew you were a bourbon guy. And when we were talking on the show, I wanted you to have a little bit more of a different experience with the single malts. Now, a single malt just means your whiskey was produced with one specific grain in one distillery only. There's no blends. They didn't, you know, parse it out to another distillery and find a different barrel. It's basically done right in house with malted barley only, and that's what gives it that unique specific profile or flavor profiles, nosing, etc. So that's my favorite. It's kind of my go-to because I grew up in a Scottish household. So I'm drinking bourbon tonight. So this is the Widow Jane I told you about. It's a 10-year-old bourbon. It's actually made in New York. So it's made, the distiller is a female, and she has perfected this amazing, unique crafted bourbon using this lime water that runs through Brooklyn. So it's made out, it comes out of Brooklyn, New York, which usually bourbons are made in Kentucky, et cetera. It's Tennessee, Texas. But this is very special. I just really appreciate her line. I'm going to have to get you a bottle sooner than later so you can try it. But it's a 10-year-old bourbon. I put in a little bit of rocks in there, which is just ice to cool it down just a little bit so I can enjoy a different experience with the flavors of the whiskey. So that's what we're enjoying tonight.
I remember that one text thread we had going back and forth about the different whiskeys and bourbons, and that was the one you brought up. And really, I think of all the ones, when I recall that conversation, that was the one you really had the highest regard for. And that says a lot, because I know that you consumed a lot of different whiskeys and bourbons over your time, and that says a lot for that brand.
I bought a former SF buddy of mine a bottle of that, and he immediately texted me when he cracked it open. He was like, "Holy mackerel, man!" He goes, "Thanks a lot. This was a good. I mean, for $60, it's a pretty decent price point for a good bourbon, a 10-year-old. But it is I don't know, something about it. It's unique, and I would recommend trying it out. So at least I can get you a bottle or have you try it. You'll see what I mean when it comes to comparing it to different bourbon lines.
I appreciate that as always. And I do. It's funny. I'll tell the story too about getting my hands on the Glendronach. I don't know. Do you remember the wild goose chase that I got sent on across Pittsburgh trying to find this bottle? Because
I tell you,
I remember we made the arrangements at one liquor store. I got there. They had no clue what I was talking about. I went to a second place. They were out, and finally went to a third, and there it was. So we were able to record the podcast as advertised, and that was a damn good time. And I really appreciated that opportunity. And of course, appreciated the whiskey. As you know, I'm still sitting on this bottle. I only break it out for special occasions. So when we're doing a live stream together, that's a special occasion for me.
Amen. Amen.
So Wylie, tell us a little bit about your background. As again, viewers that may have caught the beginning of last week's show, that's great. You're going to hear this story again because it's worth telling again on Wylie's part. But for the most part, I wiped that episode off the planet as much as I could. I know there are a couple places where it's going to live on, and I just put notes in the comments saying, hey, here's how technology works sometimes. And if you want to watch for someone getting kicked off his internet connection while I talk about how cool it is we're having the NFL draft in Pittsburgh in 2026, by all means, be my guest. But come back tonight. Here we are for the real story with good internet connection. And Wylie, I want you to let everybody know, because as I've said before, you and I have worked together. We've done podcasts together. We've had some great collaborations. We've been able to share some whiskey and share stories. I've learned a lot about your background, and I remember hearing what you did earlier in your life and me going, whoa, this is a dude worth talking to. This is before we'd ever met. I heard one of your podcast interviews, and then I saw your one sheet, and I said, yep, this guy's got to come on my podcast. And you actually kicked off Evolution of Brand as guest number one for good reason. So please tell the Bomb Squad about your background, starting with baseball, and even if you want to go back further than that, and where you've gotten to today. It's an incredible story, and then we're going to unpack that story throughout our conversation.
Oh man, yeah, these are always the fun points. You're trying to give people the meat without going too long-winded on it. But yeah, I grew up, the oldest of three boys in Southern California. So I'm from Orange County originally, to a father who's a semi-pro ball player, big Scottish Irish Catholic family, so very devout Catholic, and a lot of tradition, a lot of family values, standards, morals. I mean, I grew up around in a middle-class family. So I grew up in the 80s. I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm in my mid-40s now. And my dad, being a sports guy, connected with a lot of pro athletes. I was immediately put into baseball at like 4 years old. T-ball was the start. My dad put me on the mound. He knew with my arm, he wanted to coach me and train me and make me a pitcher. So when I got old enough to start playing actual Little League pitching baseball, that's the position I played. So I was a starting pitcher for the entirety of my baseball career all the way until I graduated high school. My dad being a semi-pro ball player, playing for the San Jose Bees in the 70s, he had a lot of contacts from family, also playing sports. I grew up around guys like Bo Jackson. Rod Carew is friends with my dad. So I grew up around the Angels baseball players because I'm from Anaheim originally. So to me, it's like I was just born into that world, and I didn't know anything else. It was just sports, playing baseball, football, off season, a little bit of soccer here and there. But my dad's primary focus was making me a star pitcher. My two other brothers came along. They got into sports as well. They found their niche. My middle brother became a football player. My youngest brother became like a swimmer and track star. And we kind of did our own thing there. So yeah, I grew up in this household. I was always, if I wasn't training, I was always off on my bikes with my friends, skating, BMX riding, collecting and trading baseball cards, getting in trouble, doing what kids in the 80s do best.
Oh, yeah. I was there too. Love it.
Yeah, exactly. Learning how to survive off garden hoses and sandwiches your friends' moms make when you go over to their houses, right? You're just playing, Segas and like the Ataris before the Nintendo came out, but that was always in balance. I think we grew up in an era, Jason, where we had a lot of good balance. We weren't inside all the time. We were outside most of the time. We got to come home when the street lights come on. For goodness sake, they had commercials that said at 10 o'clock, hey, parents, it's 10 o'clock. You know where your kids are? I think I love that. But but nevertheless, going back to the stories, I was relentlessly pushed to be this great baseball player. And everywhere I went, it was all about my dad training me to be a star. It was always about pushing me and pushing my limits. And I found myself relentlessly in season batting cages, constantly being trained by like the California Angels pitching staff, learning how to perfect my arsenal. When I started to get good at knowing how to pitch, then my dad would bring guys in to train me on how to make my arm better, how to make him throw different types of pitches. So for me, it was great. However, as I got older, you start to develop and learn a little bit more about your family and your dynamics that you're growing up in. You start to become aware of certain situations and issues. It's almost like those two worlds collided at one point when I got old enough to realize I want to say stresses of family dynamics started to play a part in me understanding why I was being forced or pushed to be a star. Why was I pushed to be a baseball player? Why was I pushed to always focus on this only when I felt part of me feeling like I was missing out on being a kid, even though I did get to have some fun. And as I got older and got into more of the junior high and high school area, I realized okay, maybe I'm not doing this because I really wanted to do this. Maybe this is something my pops brought me into. I just grew up in it. And there's nothing wrong with that aspect of things. But when you start to have these conversations with yourself and seeing how family dynamics are playing a part in your performance of what you're doing, that contrast woke me up to this world of okay, I don't know if I want to keep pursuing this because the pressure doesn't feel normal. It doesn't feel like normal baseball. Pressure, star, expectation. If I made mistakes, I felt like I was getting more of the punishment than I was the accolades. So I started to rebel against my dad's idea of what he wanted me to be. And I started to pursue alternative ways of living my life. And for me, what I fell in love with at the age of 16 years old was country music in the rodeo world. And I met a couple guys that were cowboys, and they invited me out to an event. And I went out to this event with my high school best friend and watched these guys riding bulls and bareback horses. And I fell in love with it. And I thought, I want to try that. So 16 years old, I started to break away from what my dad's pipeline was and started to go ride bulls. And started to do that. And that created this rift in my household with my dad. My dad and I started to get into these tension-driven conversations / arguments where I was basically experiencing daily discomfort when I come from school, still playing my sports, my football in high school, still playing, I got my letter as a sophomore, et cetera. I'm still doing all right, but I was doing that too. And that my dad considered a distraction. So I had these fights and arguments with my dad where, what are you doing? I expect you to do this. And I was like, well, this makes me feel alive. The world of rodeo turned me on to a whole new side of me that I wasn't getting to meet doing this with you. So I learned, I think at a young age, how to deal with discomfort in my own household under my dad's roof, while simultaneously exploring those more wild sides of me as a man, as a young man growing into myself. And I pursued it anyway, despite the fact that I constantly faced punishment and consequence. So it's almost like that was an opportunity. That was just a moment in time where I was scared to death. Okay. My dad had a look that was more powerful than a punch. You know what I mean? Like it's,
Oh, I know what you mean.
yeah.
I know what
So
you
when he
mean.
would give me that look, I'm sometimes like, would you just punch me? Because I'd rather have you just punch me in the mouth than deal with you staring at me like that, you know? And being a stoic man he is, growing up with his dad was a World War II D-Day vet, you know what I mean? A 36-year retired police chief. And so it's like that kind of household. His mother was very stoic as well, a diehard Scottish woman, you know, a devout Catholic, spoke 5 languages. So the house, it's very specific with you mind your P's and Q's, you listen and respect your elders, you shut up and you're only seen, not heard. I mean, I just grew up where I learned that. So here I am pushing up against that as I get older. And my dad and I are kind of riffing, you know, and that's fine. But I got to the point where I got old enough and I started to, you know, get into fist fights in high school with guys because I was in the rodeo world and getting into fights with kids that I didn't like. And my dad thought I had an attitude problem, and maybe I did. And I said, you know what? I need more challenge. I need to get away from this now. And what comes next? And my dad said, why don't you just join the military like everybody else in the family? I said, maybe I should. You know, that sounds like a good idea. And next thing you know, we agreed, and there was a recruiter at my table, and we started discussing opportunities. And I pursued from in high school, joined in '97 as a junior in high school, the Army Reserves, when started doing drill 1 week in a month during my senior year to get experience. And then I told my first sergeant down in my unit, hey, you know what? I meant to go into the active duty when I graduate, and I want to be a Ranger. Will you sign my paperwork and release me? He's like, 100%. You're not meant to be in the reserves. You're kind of a little bit too much of a, you kick everybody's butt in PT kind of a thing. You need to get out of here, you know? And I said, great. So he signed my paperwork. I, you know, graduated high school and went right into active duty. Infantry, served 5.5 years in the United States Army with the Rocketsons, which is the 187 Infantry out of the 101st Airborne Division, as a specialized mortarman in the infantry itself, and did a bunch of cool schools, 3 combat tours overseas, learned a lot about myself in war, learned a lot about leadership, learned about stress, how to manage yourself in chaos, what death and destruction can do to you and what you're capable of accomplishing while you're facing that. And I took that as I got out of the military and parlayed that into this pursuit of healing myself and finding resources to make me a better version of me first. And then seeking of like, what do I do next with my skills, the gifts that I have, and realizing, you know what, I'm going to build something around who I am, not something based on what somebody else did. And the business I've been running for the last 15 years is more of just behind the scenes, battling the demons of high achievers, leaders, people with influence and power, living with them, traveling with them, making them face truths that they otherwise wouldn't look at with their other coaches and consultants. And it's more of an intimate relationship-based business that optimizes the people that have the biggest impact in the world. And it's been very challenging and very intense, but it has been built off of my life's experiences as my biggest mentors to understand who I am and what it is that I'm capable of doing with another human being, rather than trying to read books and figure it out through seminars. I kind of discovered that innate nature and just built something with that. So, I started with combat veterans, helping them heal through PTSD, word of mouth. Next thing you know, I'm working with CEOs of certain companies, then a professional baseball player, then this type of person. Next thing I know, I'm working with a celebrity. And so it doesn't matter their industry. It's just a human being that really wants to be optimized. But at I work with at a level where it's very intimate, it's very deep, it's very intense, and it's not for the faint of heart. So it's very specific. So, and it's been quite crazy. So at this point, but I'm in another transitional moment, here now, and we can get into that in a little bit. I want to shut my mouth here, but that's long story short. That's really where I'm at this point.
I think you struck something very strong there, Wylie. The fact that you've worked with celebrities, you've worked with what we might consider VIPs in our world. These are a lot of the people that we emulate. And those of us that are aspiring to greater things will often look at these people and say, wow, I wish I had what they had. But we're only seeing what's on the surface. You're pulling back the curtain and seeing absolute chaos in a lot of cases, not with everybody, but you're doing your part to take all of this experience that we're going to unpack and utilize it to show somebody that there is a better way. There is a smarter way to move forward. If you're letting these demons and these roadblocks consistently slow you down or knock you to the ground where you may not even feel like you can get back up, let alone even try, you're really going to do yourself and everybody around you a disservice. But I think that's a lesson for all of us to take. The fact that does not matter what we see. Somebody may look like they have it all. They may not. There may be some things they need to address.
And it's interesting is like, it's not what people think it is. When they hear it, most people go, well, what do you do differently than another coach would do, like David Goggins or some other people? Because I actually worked with an NFL coach who did stuff with David Goggins. And it's not it's not about comparing. It's understanding unique differences between our personalities and our unique gifts and skills that we provide to the individual. What it comes down to is realizing that most people are hiring yes men, and they only focus on compartmentalization of the individual. It's like, okay, I'm going to help your business make X amount of dollars by implementing a specific funnel, certain strategy, et cetera, and that should work. And then if it doesn't work, they keep grinding at that very specific problem with that very specific solution set. They don't realize that the dynamics of human beings plays a larger role in how we operate in our businesses, because our businesses are just extensions of us. So if you don't have someone who's willing to get dirty with you, who can see the truth of what's actually plaguing you, like maybe your mother-in-law and her narcissism and how it affects your wife is actually leaking through and impacting your ability to stay focused, whether you're aware of it or not, to make the money you need to make for the family. And then you're grinding it out thinking that it's actually a surface level business solution you need to figure out, not in a personalized, intimate relationship dynamic that you need to confront. So it becomes this like, I'm just weird. It's like I just have relationships with people. It's not a traditional business. I don't transactionally connect with people. It's almost like I will only work with them after spending weeks, if not months, with that individual, making sure they're ready to even do this kind of work. Yeah. But then it's like I'm already there working with them, opening them up. I'm living with them. I'm traveling with them. I'm literally going after their in-laws, their children, their relationships. Everything and anything is not off limits. So, but I think, like to your point, we have to be willing to be self-reflective and to be honest with ourselves first. And most people at the top are not. They've accumulated wealth and impact on the back of stress, chaos, and turmoil. And they have basically learned how to cope with it. And then they walk out on camera and they show people, look how great everything is. And everybody wants that. And then people realize that the majority, if not all people at that level, believe me, are miserable people. They're not happy. They're constantly on a seeking and never-ending quest for more. And they're not fulfilled because they're lacking very specific elements in their life that they have basically have pushed away because they don't like the way it feels, or they don't like the truth that comes with it.
I've learned a lot from just talking to you, and as you know, I've listened to probably the majority of your podcast interviews because you paid me to do so I could put some good information together for your people. And it was a pleasure to do so because I learned so much about what you're unpacking right now, what you're talking about now. Because
you got more coming, by the way, so don't worry about that.
Yes, good stuff. Glad to hear it. But I think that we as humans have that tendency to always look at the negative first. And it does just get to a point where it just wraps us up in a full Nelson, to the point where like we just feel like, well, this is the only way that we're going to be able to live. We have to fight through that and enjoy the positives when they come. But at the same time, we're not really dealing with the causes that are putting us in that full Nelson to begin with. And I've been able to learn so much because it's refreshing. You said you were weird. I don't think it's weird. I think it's refreshing because I think a lot of what I've tried to incorporate with what I do when I coach somebody on podcasting, it's from that same mold. It's not, what can I do to keep this person needing me forever? I want them to learn and grow so they can become the best possible podcaster or content creator they can be. And hopefully they can leave the nest and fly on their own without my backing. They've got my support always, but I would rather see somebody grow in that respect than constantly being stuck on this hamster wheel where they're always going to need me or always going to need some sort of support system to keep them moving forward.
Yeah. And that's you bring up a great point, Jason, because that's I want to call it the epidemic in the personal development, self-help, use that term, like self-help world, that has people convinced, downright sold on the notion that because we're humans and we're seekers, that we are going to be forever in a perpetual state of needing to know, learn, and be more. And you have a lot of influencers and a lot of leaders in this industry that are making buttloads of money. They're selling programs, packaging and repurposing them year in and year out with a new twist, a new angle, a new event, a new this, to keep people on that hook so that they keep buying it. It's like when I hear people, you got to build your community. It's like, you got to build your tribe. To a degree, it's like veterans. We have our communities, we have our quote tribes. However, it's a dependency issue. I look at it this way: is working in that industry with some of those influencers, seeing behind the scenes and how it all works out, you're kind of like, wow, blows your mind, where they depend on people to buy into that because it keeps their bottom line up. And if they don't stay relevant, then they crash and burn. So it's basically the blind leading the blind. And you have people, a small percentage of people that can take a lot of that information and actually know how to apply it for their lives and actually do something that changes their lives. Where the rest of the people that are I've been to my 10th Tony Robbins Date with Destiny. Why? I've been to my 19th Brendan Burchard. Why? I've been to my 20,000 of this. Why? How are you still spending all this money and still spending in the same place and wondering why your life's not changing? But they become accustomed to the high of that community and how that feels. I'm a part of something. I'm in this community. So they create an idea that life is growing and changing. There's a difference between change and growth. So things might be changing for you incrementally, but real growth is actually stifled, if not outright completely stalled, because you're actually not being really stretched and challenged. You're not facing hard realities and truths. You're not re-traumatizing yourself through what you were broken with to actually heal through that it might be impacting your ability to make more money, have more freedom, experience more success. But then it goes back to the fact that everybody is relying on the self. Everybody thinks it's all about making you the God of your life and the God of your universe, the God of your world. Nothing else outside of you can help you. And then you're going, well, why am I miserable? Why is it that I've achieved all of these things? However, I'm still feeling like something's missing. I'm still fried. I'm still burned out. My heart hurts. My head hurts. I can't find real peace. There's a difference between experiencing relief in a perpetual state and real freedom. It's two totally different things. And we have been convinced that freedom is what we're experiencing in personal development. In reality, they're just experiencing temporary relief, and then they're taking those next steps and they're buying into it. So again, like you said, you want people to come in, get pushed, stretch, and get the heck out of the nest. I don't need you to follow me or be a part of my community. That's not my job. My job is to not depend on me. My job is just to basically be a guide that basically un-F's your life and then pushes you out. And I don't care if you hate me at the end of our relationship. That means good. Things are changing and working for you. You don't need me anymore.
And a lot of that comes down to fear. And this is how we're going to backtrack. I mean, we know that fear plays a tremendous role in our lives. I feel that if you know how to embrace it, and I think I've learned this from you and listening to what you've told other podcasters in your podcast tour, when you can embrace that fear and look it dead in the eyes and realize that it isn't playing the role, or it doesn't need to play the role that you're letting it play, that's when you can truly grow and start to make strides forward. And I believe on your end, and I this may be speculation, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but being in the rodeo circuit and having to tame, and not even tame, just ride a wild animal, there had to be moments of fear where you were asking, what the hell was I thinking? So how did you take that fear and not only overcome those situations, but apply it to all of the other aspects of your life that helped you grow and get to the next level?
Great question. The rodeo was definitely I would say the environment, the impetus for me to understand more about fear, of what fear actually is, where it comes from, and what it does to you. And I think I hear it all the time. I grew up with it. It's like, you have to learn how to overcome your fear, or learn how to, what's the other word? I might be losing in my head here, but basically the most common thing is overcome your fear. I don't think you truly overcome it. I think you look at dead in the face, and you actually learn how to understand its effects when you allow it to overtake you, and its lack of effect when you don't let it become a part of what you're experiencing. The rodeo, for me, gave me this ability to, and a lot of cowboys would say too, but really sit with, when I'm experiencing my emotions and my mental state and my feelings and everything coming up at one time, that fear that creeps in is obviously not a positive for me. So how do I embrace what I'm feeling? How do I then address it? Maybe have a conversation with, maybe I need to say a prayer. I don't know. How do I deal with that fear? Or as I like to say in that chapter, even that book that I wrote, yielding to the fear. How do I yield to it? Because yielding just means, it's kind of like letting it wash over you. Like, how do I let it wash over me and not let fear have any part of my life? Because fear is evil. It comes from a place that's not good for you. And it represents that you're dealing with something or facing something that might be challenging and scary. Well, that world was challenging and scary. So what I learned was that if I embraced yielding to it, I was able to tap more into the grace that I could experience for a better ride. I can learn how to be more present. I can connect to myself and breathe. It's almost like my prayers are being answered, if you will. And when I embrace that fear, when I allowed fear to overtake me, I had a really bad experience. I crashed more often. I got hurt a couple of times. I broke my back. Like all of those little, I fractured the L4. It wasn't serious, but those
I
little
did not know
injuries
that.
happened.
Whoa.
Yeah, I did that when I was in the Army. It was my last
Damn.
ride ever. So I fractured my spine because I wasn't focused on the principles that I had adopted by doing that. And I took that into my life every day moving forward. We're realizing when that becomes present, I have to stop and evaluate what environment am I in? What circumstances am I facing? Why would this be here right now? And slow myself down. And I honestly, here's my thing, because again, I am a man of faith. So I would definitely go into my prayer. I need to go into prayer meditation to see why I'm experiencing, and maybe help just surrender and let it go and yield or brush it off. And what I found is when I do that in my life, my experiences become more palpable. I can actually enjoy, or it doesn't mean I'm at peace all the time. It doesn't mean I'm happy all the time. I'm not, I'm a human. I'm a guy. I get irritated and frustrated, but I learn how to use that as a tool to manage the chaos that life sometimes can throw at you, and then move through it properly so that it doesn't impact or affect me, my wife, my family, the people around me. And then I can become more aware of when I'm not aware of when it's a present and affecting my life. And that contrast becomes so much clearer. It's like you can discern differently. And I think that's the piece that really I value the most, is because now everywhere I go, I'm constantly self-reflecting what I'm experiencing, how people are interacting with me, what environment I'm in, what's going on around me. Oh, that's not me. Or, oh, that is me. And now you can discern, and you can face those battles differently and use different tools, and have what my wife likes to call is a dial. How far do you need to go into the extreme to combat something versus how do you need to take a step back and kind of gracefully let it go? And then is there that middle ground? I used to be very hot or very cold.
Yeah.
I would get very violent and angry, or I'd be very like just shut off and detached. And that's post-military, coming home from war. But that is just because I didn't understand my dial and how to manage and deal with, stupid people out in public, or people doing dumb things, or interacting with things that were not favorable to me. But I had to learn that through the trials of having someone in my life who made me face my demons, who challenged me and kicked my butt. So I'm not perfect. I'm sitting here, like I'm doing this all on my own. I had someone outside of me, like I do for my clients, doing the very same thing to me. And it was very ugly and very uncomfortable. But man, it's so rewarding. And it was learning how to yield to the fear, learning how to understand when it's present, and what do I use as a tool to dial it back if I need to, so I can face whatever truth or battle, whatever demon or whatever situation appropriately for the situation. So
when you were, this, it's probably the worst follow-up ever, but I got to do it because we're on the subject. And I want to spend a good amount of our time talking about your time in the military, but I want to get this out first, because I feel like I've heard this story, and maybe I'm wrong though, because I'm sure somebody had asked you this at one of these podcasts that I consumed. What was the craziest experience that you had riding a bull?
Oh, that's wow. Two, I had two. I think I can say two back quickly. My last ride was one of the craziest because I fractured my back, but
yeah, that'll do it.
That bull that I rode was wicked, man. That was that bull was fast. I mean, she was only like, he was only 1,400 pounds. So he's definitely a lighter animal. And man, he kicked my butt. But the first wildest experience, there was a bull where I used to ride in Lake Elsinore, California. He named it White Widow. And he was like 1,800 plus pounds. He had this rack on him, and he would just look like this muscular. I was like, what are you feeding this thing? This muscular, pale white, just black eyes, just this gnarly looking thing. And when you go to a little jackpot, is what we call them, where you pay, $50, $60, $100 to entrance fee, you can win $3 grand, $5 grand, whatever it is. It's like you have these rodeos, take scores, and that's how you do it. The bulls are basically drawn. You get drawn out of a hat, and you draw your animal you're going to ride. Well, I drew White Widow, and my buddy came running up and goes, dude, he stared at me with his face. I said, what? He goes, you just drew White Widow. And my heart sank. And I thought, I've seen this bull wreck people constantly. So I said, yeah, whatever. Yield to the fear of the unknowns, man. You know what I mean? I had to step into that because I paid $60 to enter this rodeo and I wanted to win the money. So it's like, I need the cash, so I'm just going to do it anyway. And it wasn't that great, but I thought if I focus, I stay true to what it is I practice every day, breathing, etc., staying present, yielding to fear, kind of doing my ritual, praying, etc., I should be fine, And I got on this thing, and he came out of the chute. He blew out of the chute so hard, it felt like it broke my shoulder and my neck. Like the way my neck jerked, he just came out of that chute. He turned left hard. I thought he was going to go left because everybody says that's what he does when he comes out for the first 2 rounds. He didn't. He stopped and went back the other way. It confused me. So I was literally almost like, it felt like I ripped my shoulder out of the socket to pull myself back over to the other way to stay with him in the other turn. And then as he was bucking, he twisted his body into this contortion. And it's like my whole body kind of went sideways with him. And I felt like I was just being yanked apart. And when he hit the ground, he whipped his back legs up and he flipped me over the top of him. And I hit his rack with my stomach, came over the top of him, hit the ground, and he stomped over the top of my hips and blew like his snot or just right in my face, and then kept going over the top of me. And I just remember sitting there kind of like froze and hearing finally come in, almost like after gunshots going off, hearing my friends yelling, "Get out of there," screaming, "Go." And I just start crawling. I don't even know idea where this bowl is. And I'm crawling out of the chute or the arena. I climb up the fence, roll over the top. I literally fell off the top of the fence, landed on my back. He didn't care how bad that hurt. And I just laid there on my back for a little bit. And one of my buddies said I drew the bowl, came up, and he handed me a beer. He's like, "I think you're done for the day." And I said, "I think I'm done for the day too," but I had a bruise. I had this huge bruise across my stomach. My legs were bruised up. My arm was completely, I was still playing baseball. So it's like my arm was banged up. My dad wasn't happy about that, but I still was able to recover and go and play in my game. But it was just like the scariest moment where that thing, it's like that perfect momentum where he just lands on you, spits, keeps going. You're like, wow, what just happened? To me, and then the last one, the reason why I say the last one right I ever did was wicked too, is because he came out so fast. I felt like I was a tether ball on one of those poles just being whipped around. Kids are just hitting with the wrist, and he was whipping me around. I was holding on, I was riding. I rode for 7.2 seconds. I nearly covered him, and he just changed directions, and he basically batted me off the ground like you're taking a bag and slapping the dust off of it, and just smacked me on the ground, and he bounced me off my back. And I flew up in the air and hit the ground again and crawled. And I was on leave at the time in the Army, right before, in 2001. It was July 2001, and I was like, I'm done riding bulls. I'm getting ready to go to Ranger school. I can't lose my school slot. I'm like, no, I'm not doing this. No. So I quit. Wow. Yeah, but anyway, fun times. I cherish it.
Yeah, and as you've gotten older, I know you've settled down a lot. You just jump out of airplanes now.
Oh, only, yeah.
What's your count now? This number is going to blow everybody away.
I'm a little over 700.
I know. Last time I think we talked about this, you're just over 6. So
yeah,
you're still jumping.
9 years later, yeah.
9 years later. So that and that was experience that began in the military, correct?
No, I didn't get to go to jump school in the military. Yeah, they that's a long story. They took like 9 of us. They took us to airborne preps, our prep work, and then came back and told us like the next day that they had to give our slots to the West Point cadets because they had to push guys through. It's the needs of the Army, and sometimes it happens. And I lost my jump slot, but that's okay. Nature of the beast. I just always wanted to jump out of airplanes, so that's why I started skydiving. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So I thought some of that number was attributed to military time. Okay.
All civilian skydives. Yeah.
All civilian skydiving. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So well, let's talk a little bit about the military, because I know that you had mentioned when you were telling your story, you're at another transitional point in your life.
Yeah.
And I know that does involve the military. So before we even get into where we're at today, let's talk a little bit about the past. So you mentioned a lot of those leadership skills. They came from the military, and you've been able to parlay that into what you do with the celebrities, with the VIPs, even other veterans. There's a lot of good that you've been able to take from that. When you were in that environment, I'm sorry?
Just the leaders, Doesn't matter what industry or business. Leaders.
Right. Exactly. When you're in that environment, when you're in the heat of battle, when does that leadership gene or that leadership spark really go off inside of you to know where it's time for me to own this. I need to step up and be the one that takes control of this. And ultimately what that would lead to is the rest of the rest of the troops seeing you as that leader. When did that happen for you, and how did you get yourself to that point?
When did I have those moments where that was my responsibility to take ownership as a leader?
Was there any specific moments that you can recall that really said inside yourself, you said, okay, this is my time to stand up and embrace this as the leader, and this is how I'm going to move forward in this, and everybody else is going to see me as their leader in this situation and beyond?
Yeah, well, a little bit of preface for that is when you join the military as a private, as an enlisted guy, you know, you're joining the military to do your job, but you're told and taught to learn how to do the job of the person above you. And then when you start climbing in specific rank and position, you learn how to make sure to maintain your ability to do the job also below and above you. So you never stop learning about different types of leadership characteristic traits and skills while developing your own. So you have good leaders and you have bad leaders. You have people that give you the right environments to learn how to stretch that capacity to expose what you're capable of, because leadership can be taught. Now, not everybody is meant to be a leader and not everybody becomes one, but it can be taught to a degree based on someone's capacity. So I think the military is really good at that because they put you through training pipelines that not only break you down, build you up, teach you how to be a warrior, but also what it means to be a leader in those positions and learning how to handle and deal with responsibilities. So I think when I got into a point where I was an E3 and I went to Kosovo for my first deployment, I started to get more latitude from my platoon sergeant to take leadership and ownership of certain things. They start to give you more responsibilities. They say, okay, I want you to be responsible for X. And then he wants to see how you perform with that, and you go, okay, it's nothing crazy, but it might be something small. It might be something significant. And what's interesting is my very first experience of real ownership and leadership was when, I'd made friends with a platoon sergeant for the 11 Bravos in our company, the door kickers. As 11 Charlie and Mortarman, I was in more of the specialized mortar gun team. Sergeant Van Egan was his name, and he was a former sniper. And he's like, I really like McGraw. And he told my platoon sergeant, I'm going to take McGraw on this patrol that we got tasked with when we were in Kosovo. And it was a covert reconnaissance operation to go into a demilitarized area to capture, do reconnaissance and capture intel and information on the Serbian MUP that were doing a lot of ethnic cleansing during that time over there in the Balkans. So, and I remember him going, I want to take, McGraw on this 10-man patrol with me. So I was like, right on. So they came up to me and said, hey, are you willing to carry the radio, be the RTO for the lieutenant, which is radio transmission officer, essentially. It's like, I was like, that's a big responsibility. Absolutely. So I carried the radio on the hump. We did an infiltration. We humped for 7 hours in the dark until we found our position, got into the mountains, set up our little, area where we were doing recon in a covert manner. And I was on a 5-man team on one side. There was another 5-man team over here. And I remember the lieutenant telling me, he's like, hey, this is your, you got this, this is your station now. I'm going to take a nap. The guys are sleeping. You keep your eyes out. You keep us alert. Let us know. Stay on the radio. And I was thought, I'm a 20-year-old E3. Okay. Wow. I'll do this. Time to step up. And that's what I did. And I just took ownership of that, and I was responsible for when the 12 guys came up with their AK-47s into the area. We ended up capturing these guys later. We got the intel. We were on this operation for like 12 plus hours. They didn't know we were there, but they thought we were there. I was on the radio with like different Apache pilots up above us that were coming in and taking pictures and keeping guys kind of calm, telling the dudes behind me through our little mic radios what I need them to do, moving around with the lieutenant. So it was a really good opportunity at a young age to learn in a moment of chaos where we were facing a real armed enemy on how to manage a small element of responsibility. And it felt very prideful for me in a way as a 20-year-old to go in and go, okay, now I feel like a real soldier. Now I know what it means to truly be a soldier in all sense of the word. And then I took that into my desire to take correspondence courses, go to leadership training things, learn different like technical skills, ask questions of my platoon sergeant, start learning from other leaders in my company so that I could get promoted and I could start becoming a better opportunity for maybe an NCO. So I got promoted early to E4 when we got home from Kosovo. I re-enlisted, got my EIB, which is the Expert Infantryman's Badge, which is a prestigious badge that we actually like really love and honor in the infantry. And I thought that was another boost of confidence, and I started to And then my platoon sergeant, hey, you're the base gun gunner, number one gunner on our team. You guys are the fastest in the battalion. I'm going to put you in charge of the guys this time for this training op. Okay, great. So then I learned how to manage and organize the 4-man team, learning how to get earn their respect while still giving them the task conditions and standards, what it is we needed to do, what we were expected to accomplish, how many rounds we needed to fire, what our targets were. And it was really nerve-wracking because you're now 4 guys staring at you going, dude, lead me, show me, teach me. They'll execute. They know their jobs, but a leader's job is to organize that and make sure you motivate and move them and inspire them to be the best. So it was like learning how it's not about me anymore. It's really about these guys, and earning their respect. And the next thing I know, it's like, we're going to Afghanistan in 01. I'm going to Afghanistan. We're going on a combat operation. I get put in charge to set the gun system up without any oversight so we can get rounds downrange against the Taliban and protect our guys that are in gunfights. We're able to do that, you know what I mean? And doing it in a timely fashion where we save lives. So it was like, it just started to compound and parlay into these opportunities where I was able to save lives in combat because I learned at a younger age in the military on how to understand what leadership really means based on who I am, but also what it is that I learned, what responsibilities are. And I thought, you know what? It's nerve-wracking. You want to talk about fear? You want to talk about leaning into those things? That's all there too. You just don't have time to think. If they give you the task, execute, step up, just start. You know what? Certain basics, start doing them. And once you start turning the wheels, things just kind of pick up from there. And then at one point I got transferred to another company and I became the squad leader for a 60 mortar section on our way to Iraq. So I was responsible for my team in actual combat, where my platoon sergeant and I were talking, hey, what do you think you're going to do with your guys? And I had to come up with different things we're going to do on a daily basis. I had to come up with PT plans. I had to share with them, hey, this is what I think we're going to do with the guys this morning. What do you think, Sergeant? He's like, yeah, roger that. It's good. Go take care of them. And I have to go do it. And it really felt good to be at a point where I became a corporal and NCO. I got the responsibility. My first sergeant would come talk to me like a leader, hey, what are your mortars doing right now out here? Roger, first sergeant, we're doing this, we're doing that. Hey, sir, we're doing this, we're doing that. Right, you've got it squared away, no problem. And they leave you alone because you know what you're doing. And your guys execute, and the confidence gets boosted. But man, when you get into gunfights or when you get into situations that are hairy, you better at least be able to make a decision in those moments, even if it's not the best or the most righteous decision. Make a decision. And I found certain moments where we were doing raids or doing running through the towns and like patrols where we had to take people in and arrest them or kick their doors in and find weapons in them. The way they interact, I mean, those people are scared, but there are also bad guys over there that are using them as shields. And you have to make split-second decisions while you're going and doing that, because that last second you didn't make that decision can be a gunfight that can kill someone that you don't want to be killed. So
absolutely,
it's I don't know. It's just, unless you're there, it's really hard to explain. And a lot of military guys are out in the world now explaining on podcasts, but I think it's just, we're all individually having our own experiences too. And I think it's amazing to look back and go, wow, I can't believe I got to do that. I can't believe I did do that. And I can't believe that some of the decisions I did make actually had a benefit. That's kind of cool too. But also there were times where I didn't know and I'd be like, hey, I don't know what to do here, and I need you to do it. And you just basically delegate that, and you don't be an idiot. Just learn. Sometimes leadership is about stepping back too and letting somebody else take over,
No, there's a lot of lessons baked into that. I think we see a lot of it's just in regards to leadership, it is all about that decisiveness, but it's also that self-awareness of knowing that there are people around you that may have a better answer. I think that's a lesson we can all take to heart, is the fact that even if we are in a position of leadership, and in most instances, people are looking at us as just that, there's going to be feedback, there's going to be ideas, there's going to be certain instances and aspects that will come up where the person beneath you or 2 or 3 levels beneath you knows more, and they
might have a better way to do it.
Absolutely. And that's, I know a lot of people get fed up with jobs and working for companies because the person above them or 2 levels above them wants nothing to do with their ideas. They won't listen. They feel they've got the answer for everything, when in reality, that's creating terrible morale. It's hurting everyone down below them. They don't feel like their voices are being heard, and therefore nobody can grow. And that's why you see so many people jumping from one company to the next or one opportunity to the next, because they don't feel like they are playing an active role in making a difference.
You know what I've noticed too, being from the military and then even now in the civilian world, is there's a huge lack of humility. And I think that the problem is that humility is the key fundamental of being a good leader. If it's not about saying I'm humble, it's about show. Again, I look at it as like, it was never really about Corporal McGraw. It's never really about me, ever. And I realized that I was able to have a good time with the guys I served with because of that. It was like I just was me being me, and like, hey, my Private Ramirez, one of my guys, came up to me and was like, hey, can I share with you what I think we could possibly do here and here? I'm like, absolutely. Like, I want to hear it. Let's go. Like, we're a team. That's what team is. Just because I might be the non-commissioned officer in that moment in front of those privates doesn't mean they're less than or subpar human beings. They are still. I was there too. You know what I mean? So
right.
I had an idea one time that my platoon sergeant told me to shut up, and it's like I'll never forget that. And like, I had an idea, but because I was an E1 or an E2 or whatever it was, I wasn't worthy of speaking up. But it could have been just an addition to whatever we were doing. It doesn't mean it was going to be the answer. And I think that's a lot of special operations communities do that very well. They have a lot of that team. Everybody's input matters, and a lot of the times the team leader always, might always let their plans work, because he's like, hey, that's a better plan than what I would have given. So it's humility. I think people are lacking that. I think now in a more selfish, hyper vanity driven, ego-centric world, humility is the last thing a lot of leaders tap into, and they're wondering why things aren't going voting well for them. And I think that's what we got to get back to, is realizing if you can be a humble person and realize what humility really means. Humility is very powerful, way more powerful than just being an angry monkey, demanding people to respect you and listen to you. It works way better.
I think it goes back to what we were talking about before we went live tonight. The fact that a lot of people are worried about hurting feelings, and the fact that they're not willing to face that truth. And sometimes hearing that truth can hurt for a moment, but it can help you grow. But if we're going to constantly be knocked down to the point of submission when we hear something that we don't like to hear, that's rough. And that makes it hard for everybody.
Well, you know what? We have a world that has been built around the idea that if it doesn't sound a certain way or doesn't look a certain way, then it's a threat. It's wrong. It's mean. It's anger. I remember I told a gal I met at an event in Mexico. She ran a $3 million a year online business, and she said, I want to go beyond this, but I've done everything and I can't figure out what might be in my way. And I remember meeting her in LA and having a conversation with her and just consulting and kind of connecting. And then basically, we were texting each other afterwards, and I started to share with her. I told her who I was and what I do. And I just started giving her the truth about what's really going on, what she's experiencing, why she's experiencing it. And she had the nerve, because it was very in your face, was very direct, but real. And if you can't sense that I'm coming from love and I'm just being honest with you, that's another problem. But I thought we shared that I'm going to be real. I'm going to be candid. I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off, and I'm not going to hold anything back. And if that's because if you're an entrepreneur and you want it, this is what you're going to need to hear, and you need to do something about it. And she told me, this is not what coaching is. This is not how you coach people. So she started to try to tell me how I was doing it wrong, because she didn't like the way it sounded. And I thought, and then she goes, you know what? I think I'm fine at $3 million a year. And I was like, okay, cool. And that's okay. I'm not for everyone. And I totally get that. But that's the premise of people, is that I don't like the way that sounds, so you're just mean, or you don't know anything. That's just your opinion. And here's the thing. People demand the truth until the truth is turned on them, and then it's just an opinion. That's the crazy part.
Very true.
So,
no, we've got a long way to go in that respect, and it's sad because I feel, in saying that we have a long way to go, but we have to almost go backwards. We have to go back to where we were able to accept some tough love and take that as good. Sometimes you can implement what somebody says to you and utilize it to your advantage. Other times it may not be the right advice at the right time. You can store it away for a later date. But overall, if you're going to constantly get upset when somebody is truly trying to help you, because like you just said, Wylie, you don't like the way it sounds, you don't like the way it feels in the moment, that there's no growth.
It's about discerning. It's also about discerning the moment somebody shows up in your life that you can tell you're like, okay, something's different here. I don't, why did I just meet this specific person in the time? Again, go back to the bull riding, go back to these, can you stop and discern in that moment, why am I having this kind of conversation with this person that seems intense, but yet I'm hearing so many of these things I don't really like I'm hearing, but I'm experiencing X over here in my life. I've been hoping and praying that I might get some answers. Suddenly I get a coach or a consultant or a person or this and that shows up, starts giving me harsh realities and truths. Nobody does that. They don't stop and go, huh, why right now? And I've had plenty of these conversations with a lot of these public figures I've met over the years, and they're like, well, I just don't plot my course based on where someone is in my life. I'm like, do you think that I showed up in the timing I did with the problems you're dealing with right now? Your friend introduced us randomly because we're supposed to connect 2 years from now. And they go, that's a good point. I'm like, you have to start discerning, why are you, and people are missing out on so many opportunities because they want it to be exactly what, it's like familiarity, and it breeds this like idea that if I don't control what it looks like, how it sounds, and what it feels like when it shows up, then it's not for me. And you get these people that get into the woo-woo world of like, it's my full body no, and I don't feel like spiritually, it's like, no, none of that matters. You're just making up excuses for your fear that is leading you down. Fear is disguised by so many things like anger and this idea that, they're feeling something that doesn't feel right. And people, I'm scary. I get it. I've had clients say that to me. It's like, okay, they're like, oh, you're intense. It's like, yeah, that feeling doesn't negate the goodness that I'm here to provide you. It doesn't negate the love that I have to make sure you get what you need. Just because it comes across as something that's not what you're used to doesn't mean it's automatically dangerous. And people throw away others because they go, I don't like the way this feels. This doesn't make sense to me. It's like, good. Discern. Maybe that person isn't for you, but maybe there's some gem you can pull out of that interaction or that conversation that might be beneficial for you, so that you can turn, pivot, and actually see the person or thing that you're supposed to be engaged with.
I know we could go on and on about this because you and I have done just that before, because there's a lot there. And I feel that one of those big things that,
of course,
one of the big things, and I'll before I segue to hearing what you're up to today, because that's a big part of this as well. I feel that one of the big things that we feel is a necessity in life is the perfect moment. The perfect moment to take action on whatever it may be. And there is no perfect moment. That's never going to happen. If you push things downstream, the problems of today will just be the problems that you face in the future, or they're just a whole new set of problems altogether. If you feel that something is going to bring positivity to your life, benefits, growth, don't delay. Don't wait for the perfect moment, because you'll just be waiting forever. It's crazy. And I hear this a lot anymore these days. Starting a podcast is a big one. It's not exactly the thing you need at this moment, but at the same time, why wait? Because you're costing yourself the communication, the connection, the connectivity, the collaboration, and the content. I just rattled off the 5 C's that will bring you so much value in your brand. But why wait? Why wait till down the road? Because why wouldn't you want to experience that now? That's just my 2 cents on this.
Well, didn't you, like, you started yours real quick? I think you told me you started yours in like a bar, or you were somewhere drinking a beer and you just pulled a microphone out, right?
That's the first podcast I ever did. We put 2 weeks of planning into it, and then we just hit record.
That's it.
And it was, like, there's some good and bad. For one, I didn't put, there was no time to say like, well, what if we do this, 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 and this? Let's just freaking go.
Made a decision.
There's some benefits in doing that. When I look back on it, maybe some planning would have made that show a little bit more focused, but I knew that nothing was going to hold me back. I knew I wanted to do this.
Well, that's how you learn that's how you learn to find the blind spots and the tweaks that are needed. You're not going to know until you give it a go. And I think that's, it's kind of like training. People will say, well, I want to make sure my body's in perfect shape before I go do this challenge. It's like, like, my body was in perfect shape before I started riding bulls. I wasn't. I just got on the back of a darn bull and gave it a go. And I was like, oh, that's what I have to learn how to do for myself to be better at this. And you just keep progressing from there. But I think the last piece before we jump into what you want to talk about is that I believe, and I've seen many people are caught in the grind of, well, I'm taking action, Jason. I'm taking action right now and nothing's working. And society says I got to keep grinding because I'm almost to my breakthrough. And I would challenge people to go, well, maybe you're actually not listening to signs or whatever you want to call it that are telling you you're facing in the wrong direction. I think people sometimes taking action in the wrong direction, and they are believing the hype that social media influencers and leaders and people out there are telling them is, you know what? No, don't quit. Now, I'm all for it. When you're engaged in something that's meaningful for you and you're focused and you're warrioring it through there, damn right. Do one more. Don't quit.
Yeah.
But sometimes you need to take a step back and go, is this the place that I need to keep warrior through right now? Am I truly on the right path, or am I lying to myself thinking because I want to be like those celebrities you talked about earlier? Like, I want to be like those people and have the business and have the success. So they just said, keep grinding, grind, keep going this direction. Maybe I got to go, you know what? Maybe if I just pivot a little, like on a mortar gun sight where we just turn the mortar sight and our gun can shift a little, we can hit the target a little more accurately. Maybe we just need to change the scope of where you're looking at, and then grind and not quit. And I think that's the other piece I want to leave people with too, is like, dude, just stop grinding and thinking you're going to have that breakthrough. If it's been years and you're not getting anywhere, there's a problem there. We've got to reevaluate.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between taking action and just looking busy or feeling busy.
Right.
You have to be taking action on the right things. And I think we could use this live stream as a perfect example. And I actually talked about this. I was in my friend Mark Ronick's clubhouse room this morning, and he'll actually be joining me tomorrow night here on Let's Blow This Up Live. And we were talking about the fact that this show is new. It's only been going for a few weeks.
Yeah.
And I was very real coming into it, knowing that, well, the world isn't going to just show up because I went live. I need to establish an audience and prove that we're going to be here every week having great conversations and bringing value to you as a consumer. So as you watch this live video, or maybe listen to it on the podcast stream on Friday when it goes there, or maybe if you catch it after the fact, but you do consume it and you do get something from it, if there's proof that we're going to be here consistently delivering that to you, then sure, that's going to make you say, okay, I'm going to show up and watch it live. But you can promote the hell out of something over and over and over, but until people really feel that okay, I know this person's here to stay, and I'm seeing value each and every week, that's when they're going to stick around. But a lot of people they don't have the patience to push through that part of it. They want the instant, give me the whole world listening or watching, or else I'm out. And it just does not work that way.
Social media is really bad with that. People will take a picture and they'll post it. If they don't get 1,000 likes in the first 12 hours or go viral, they'll take it down and redo it. It's like, okay, here's the thing. I learned, and I'm sure you get this, and many people that are out there will get this, is one person is just as valuable as 1,000 people. If you've got one person in your audience, that do not diminish the standards of how you perform and operate. And it's like, I remember I ran a short period of time at one point in my life. I ran a men's meditation group, and just getting guys that are busy professionals to come down and just take a load off at my place. And I remember one guy showed up one night, and it was just, and I knew it was going to be that way. I thought maybe I'll just cancel it, but he knocked on the door. He's like, hey, look, I needed this tonight. I was like, come on in. And I gave him exactly what I would have given 50 guys that were usually there. And I was like, look, you get it. You deserve it. So I think having one person listen to the show as it's new, it's still valuable, because that one person has a lot of people. And that one person can get the one piece of nugget that might change their life. And the next thing you know, they're talking about where they got that from. That's just how it works. And I think people don't value the minority aspect of things. They just want, because the world teaches them that you're not valuable unless you have followers and you look big, you have the money, you have the fame. And it's like, that doesn't matter. What matters is the kind of interactions and relationships you can build through whatever mediums you're actually utilizing.
And see, and that's you before again. We're going overtime, and I don't care. It's my show. I'm having too much fun talking with you, brother.
Brother. Yeah.
Well, this is going to be my new point of conversation. I'm looking at podcasting, and I'm looking at social media, and I'm looking at what social media was when it first came out versus what it is today. And I'm looking at what podcasting is and how that can make those genuine connections. This is the social media now. Podcasting is the social media. Social media, as we know it, is pay to play, advertising driven. It's all algorithm driven. You're not necessarily seeing the things you want to see at all times. From every now and then, the algorithm is listening and feeds you what you want. But social media in this respect, in this podcast platform, whether it's done through live stream or whether it's done through
True
podcast,
to the term. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Like you're making these genuine connections. You and me made a genuine connection because of podcasting. I can make a genuine connection with anybody that listens to this content, and so can you, being part of this show. Anybody that joins in and listens and gets something from that content can truly feel like they can take the next step towards connecting with that person, whether it be through their social media, their website, their podcast, whatever it may be.
Right.
There is so much more value in the social aspect of podcasting than there is in the social aspect of social media. This is my new crusade. I will start shouting this very loudly until someone tells me to shut up, and then I'll just shout louder. I feel this is where we need to start going, and this is how we get.
So the social media that we're talking about over here has become a cesspool of dysfunction. It is a place for people to just blatantly, it's just like passive aggressive, narcissistic platitudes and attacks. People just ad hominem attacks. People are just arguing with each other. There's no, I mean, you make a comment on anything on Twitter or X or whatever it's called, and man, people are. Somebody just has to say something. And I'm reminded of like an old Stoic that said, you know, it's like wise men speak because they have something to say, fools because they just need to say something. I think it's Plato, but it's like, that's what's going on across those platforms. And now it's just basically, I think my business partner, she goes, people have reverted back to adolescence. They are now this social media craze has made people children again, where they're just bickering at each other like they're in high school again. It's all a popularity contest. The big accounts get all the attention. The little accounts are like these, and everybody laughs at you and says, well, who are you to say anything because you don't have any followers anyway? And it's almost like your information is invaluable because you don't have 1 million followers on the platform. And it's like, okay, well,
nobody likes you. You don't have any friends.
And all you see from these people now is drama. And so drama pays, balance does not, and people don't want balance. They don't want, so these are platforms you're using right now to create balance or trying to circumvent the dysfunction and kind of keep the conversations of intimacy going with people while we have this digital age to keep some form of like, I would say antagonist towards the dysfunction that we're starting to see creep through the entire social media landscape. So anyway, let's carry on to the next part because I know we want to.
Yeah, before we wrap up, I know that you're going through a lot right now, and it's a big change, a big shift. I remember when we first connected and talked about this. I remember I was driving my car, and I think you were too, if I recall, that we were having this conversation. I just remember driving down the road going, wow, I can't believe this is where it's at for you right now. So
me too.
Yeah, but I mean, from what you're telling me, things are going well. So at the age of 44, you've decided to re-enlist and go back into the military. So what drove that decision, and what are you experiencing now that you've made that decision and you are officially walking that path?
Wow. It's to do my best to truncate the long story short. Last year, I had a very vivid, I want to say the most vivid dream I've had in a long time. And I was with 4 teammates in uniform during a night raid. And we were doing like this in a combat patrol. We were in Iraq. And I remember, I thought I was there. That's how real it was that I woke up actually startled and shaken to like where I didn't know where I was when I woke up in my bedroom. And I woke my wife up and I was like, hey, I need to talk. And I just, something just hit me really hard. And I need to know what this is. And I thought maybe it's just combat. 20 years later, I've been out 20 years. So it's kind of like, what was that? And throughout the day, I started to feel this like pull in my heart of, do I want to go back? Nah. I started having that conversation. Like, do I miss that? Of course I do. We all miss that. And I started to play with that discernment. And honestly, I took it to prayer. I started praying daily, going, you know what? I'm just going to surrender at this point and then next day I had the same dream. And then the next day I had this dream, these different versions of it, but just over these realistic dreams for like a month. And I thought, okay, something's calling me here. There's this calling. And I remember that feeling when I was in high school where I was feeling called to bull riding, feeling called away from the baseball path. I was like, something's calling me to pursue this. And I thought, let me just keep having the conversations with my wife and my spiritual advisors. I go to church, kind of pray, kind of be in my space where I meditate on this a little bit. And as the months progressed, my wife and I looked at each other and I said, no, I said, honey, it's every time I go, hey, God, you know what? If you want me to do this, great. Walk with me through it. If you don't, get it off of my heart. I don't want it. I don't want to do this. I'm 43 at the time. Now I'm 44. Like if I wanted to do this stuff, I should have done it 10 years ago. You know what I mean? So I'm looking
Right.
like I'm pretty old up there now at this point. Even though I take care of myself, I eat well. You know, I drink a little bit of whiskey every once in a while, but I exercise 5-6 days a week. I'm in a good place physically. We decided, Jason, let's pursue and knock on doors because that's what you got to do. So I knocked on the door. My wife says, call a recruiter. Okay. She's like, just give it a go. She's like, I'm ride or die with you. You know, where if you go, you go. I go with you. I said, okay. So I knock on the door. I call a recruiter. He goes, you know what? He goes, absolutely. He goes, well, age waiver you. What job do you want? And I said, well, my very first job I ever wanted was getting a Ranger regiment with my brother, who was a Ranger. He's like, done. We can make that happen. I was like, you're joking me, right? He goes, no. He goes, we'll take your 5.5 years of active duty off your actual biological age, makes you 39 now by the Army standards. We'll age waiver you. He goes, all you have to do is just take care of your physical stuff. You got some like old injuries you got to fix up. Go to the VA, get it done. That's the longest process to get all your medical handled. We'll submit it to the MEPS and we'll work out a deal where we get you the contract you want, put you in the pipeline. And I thought, okay. So I started to train. And I went to the VA, and the VA was like, whatever you need. I had to have surgery to remove plates and hardware out of my right wrist from a bad motorcycle wreck I had 11 years ago. Now my wrist is fully functional again. I'm doing pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, weightlifting, like throwing things. Okay, so I'm performing this way. Go to the VA again. They're like, hey, we gotta make you bionic. You got some tears in your knee. We gotta rehab that. So I'm doing PRP and prolotherapy and regenerative medicine stuff. They're taking care of all my PT and occupational therapy. I mean, it's like clockwork. Every door I knock keeps opening up. I'm going, okay, clearly this is a path I'm meant to go down. And then on top of that, I'm having conversations on podcasts with retired colonels. I was on, the Rob Maness show. He's a retired Air Force colonel, former political candidate, et cetera. And he's like, Wylie, I really think guys like you should come back in. Our younger generation needs older mentors to help change the culture back to where it was during our GWAT era. The ranks are very thin. The military is hurting right now. I talked to some other guys, a retired general that I know in 1-star. He's like, Wylie, I really think you should do it. And every person I said I wanted to do that, they all were like, we back you 100%. And I thought, okay, every person is saying yes. Even in this time right now with everything going on and everybody's bashing the military. And I look at it from my perspective and I go, you know what? How can people sit on social media and complain about how bad the military is and how bad the United States is, but not lift a finger to sacrifice to do something about it? And I realized, going back to your thing about taking action, it's like, am I being called to serve again because there's a benefit to my abilities now as an older man with what I do know and what I've done in my work, taking it into the military to be maybe a mentor, maybe there are young guys in there that I might run into who I don't know who I'm going to impact, lead, etc. The work I might have to do. And I thought simultaneously, Jason, I'm so sick and tired of watching veterans themselves as well and the civilian population basically berate and bash military service like it's some almost like anti-American thing to do now. And it breaks my heart because I think you want the world to change. You want the military to be what it was once before, great, representing what we stand for. You want America to be saved, but your solution is to use Twitter to bitch about it and tell people they're stupid for joining. That's your solution.
Why would they do that though? Like what?
Because good question. And I think this is just in combination of what I've been doing. It's like I feel like I'm being called to do it, but I'm also seeing that by doing so, it could be hopefully an inspiration to some other vets that are on the fence about doing it again, because I've met other veterans for thinking about it. And I talked to a guy yesterday during Memorial Day, and he's like, Wylie, he goes, if I didn't have damage this and this, I would join you. That's motivating because I didn't think about it until you started talking about it. So, but the people are doing that is because the veil has been pulled back now more than it has ever been in the history of our country when it comes to seeing the political establishment's ulterior motives when it comes to war. So the United States has always had political ambitions and agendas behind the curtains when we go to war with other countries. Let's just be real. Everybody goes, we haven't fought a war for freedom since World War II. Well, World War II wasn't 100% just about freedom either. No war we've ever fought is 100% flag and freedom. There's always the establishment, there's always the elites, there's always money. It's a business. There's always those factors that will always be there. You're never going to change that. That does not negate what military service is about. I don't care. I will fight that tooth and nail to the death. That does not negate what military service is about. None of us join the military because we want to go fight for the corporate agendas or the elitists. We don't do it that way. We join because there's still traditions, there's still way of life, there's still the fact that we do and have lived in the greatest country ever built on the face of the earth. And people can laugh at that, yell at that, say I'm wrong, call me names. But that's the truth, because I've met people in 30 different countries who all said, you know what? It's really hard following the footsteps of the United States, man. That's why everybody keeps coming there. No matter how bad things are over there, you guys are still the place to come live. You're still the place to be. Right. Even right now, people are saying that. And it's like, if we were really that bad, why are people breaking through the border and trying to get here? Why are people constantly trying to come here and figure that out? So anyway, my passion here is like, you know what? I've done really decent for myself doing my work for 15 years. Maybe there's this pivot in my life that maybe there's a short period of time where I go back in the military. I do my job. I participate as a warrior to climb some ranks. Maybe I bring some leadership perspectives into the mix here to change policies as things are getting, basically beat up. Maybe I might people that need it. Maybe I might meet new contacts. I may have new opportunities. I don't know. But the point is, I'm training. I've been training for the last four months straight, 6 days a week. I've been exercising, rucking, running, lifting weights, getting myself back into the shape to be a U.S. Army Ranger. I know I can make it mentally, so it's just physically. I got to make sure I can pass all the physical, gates and things like that. Because when I get into it, I'm just not. So I'm very much a gripper. I won't quit. So I definitely know mentally I can get through those things. But I feel like we need more guys at my age, unfortunately, now to step up and serve. If it's not the military, it's got to get into Congress, get into the Senate, go run for your city council, go do something in your communities. We're not going to stave off the degradation of the United States military and the armed forces and the way of life by bitching about it on social media and telling people in legacy military families to avoid service at all costs. That's strong, smart men. Avoiding military service is why we are in the place we're in right now. It is why we have this woke communistic ideologies that are infiltrating and deteriorating what leadership is in the military and taking the focus away from warfighting and protecting the stars and stripes and the Constitution so that we can maintain this way of life for the foreseeable future. But people are just seeing the corruption now more than ever. That's all it is. And there's like, whoa, I didn't realize how bad it was behind the scenes. Yeah, but you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You just don't do that. Military service still has a value and a pride to it that matters to the United States. And if you want to see it fall apart, you want to turn into a third world country and whatever we fear the most, keep avoiding military service, keep telling people they're stupid for joining, and keep doing everything you can to degrade it across social media and showing the younger generation how stupid it is. And it's target fixation, Jason. We will literally hit our effing target if we keep doing it that way. So I think all in all, I'm feeling more and more alive about this. My wife is now finally 100% on board with joining the military. Everybody's on board. My recruiter's ready to submit all my documents at the end of summer. I'm committed, and I feel like this is my calling. It's my next calling. And by all means, like if I get there and they open the door, we're getting ready to ship, and then suddenly it all stops, then it stops. But I don't know. I'm kind of excited about the idea of serving again too, though. Putting the uniform on, kind of get back into the mix. Carrying a rifle, being on a team, doing some really serving my country at a higher level this time, kind of getting to the job I always wanted to do, being part of the special operations community and going doing some really cool things and fighting for saving the values that we hold so dear in this country. So we can sit here on a podcast like this on a Tuesday night and rap back and forth without fear of somebody kicking in our door and taking us to jail or killing us. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
that's what's happening right now.
Well, it takes a special kind of person, I believe, to walk down that path at any point in their life. You really have to be. I mean, there's obviously a strong love affair with country and tradition and pride, and you've done that in the past, and you're doing it again. So Godspeed.
I came from a legacy military family. I mean, every man in my family has been a combat veteran since World War II. So it definitely is part of my fabric of being. Absolutely.
Right. And clearly that calling was strong enough to bring you back to do it all over again. And I know the leadership skills that you used the first time around,
Excuse me.
combined with everything you've been doing in I don't want to even call it the corporate world, in your pursuits over the past 20 years. What's that?
The private sector, yeah.
Private sector, exactly.
Yeah.
But all of that's going to be tremendously beneficial to not only people that are in the military today, but those that are aspiring. Or we'll end on this note and on this question: do you feel that this is gonna come off sort of bad? But we know what we're seeing in the world. We're seeing what younger generations that are spending a lot of time with technology, on devices, on phones, with video games, not in that mental state of going to war, wanting to be in the military. Now that could be one element, combined with what you were saying before about other veterans using social media to bash the current state and why they shouldn't go down that path. Do you feel all of this is playing a role in the need for someone like you at your age to re-enlist, to where someone at a younger age is not taking that step for, it could be any of those reasons I just listed off? What are your thoughts on that? And that's how I'll wrap this up tonight.
Phenomenal question, Jason. A great way to end it too, because here's the thing. We are obligated. A lot of people, I don't think a lot of people know this, and I did the research on it, and I talked to some folks I know at the VA. Veterans are still exposed to potential military drafts or conscriptions, if you will, up to the age of 60 years old, if you are still in functional shape and able to do the job. If you're like 100% total and permanent disabled, you're off the hook.
Yeah.
So what I have been having conversations with for the last year and a half, I've been predicting, and I'm not trying to toot my horn here, but it's just predicting with a lot of different people I've been knowing, that we are going to see at least what I call a limited conscription, or a drip conscription, where because the ranks are getting so thinned out and we don't have the force we need to deal with a large scale conflict, which we're going to bang in the Middle East again. I don't care what anybody says, it's going to happen. We're going to go there again. We're not done. We're going to have, now China's getting involved. We got Iran doing what's going on over there. All of these threats that are happening here, we're going to go and have another major large scale war. If we don't have the right force in place, they're going to start picking from the population. And as scary as that sounds to people, especially in 2024, sorry, not sorry, it's going to happen. People didn't think they were going to do it during Vietnam. Guess what? They did it during Vietnam. So and then I have a gal I know who used to work for the State Department. She sends me a text. The Hill writes a piece on limited draft is being considered for the U.S. military. And then I get these in text messages from people I know. Wylie, you were right. Check it out. You know what? This Marine just got recalled. He's been out 3 years. They just called him back involuntarily, said, you got to come back to active duty. The Air Force is actively recruiting retirees and veterans and offering them upwards of $175,000 signing bonuses to come back. The age limits are being raised across all branches. The Navy took away its requirements to be in the Navy. You have to have no high school diploma or GED, just get a 50 on the ASVAB. So they are going to start testing the waters little by little over the next year or two to see how the population is going to react to a potential conscription when we need the force requirements to go fight a large-scale war. I'm looking at it as like, well, I might as well choose my job. I might as well go back to and figure out, you know what, I'm going to participate in the volunteer army like everybody else did. And if there are other veterans out there that end up hearing this, it's like, if you're on the fence and you're feeling like I kind of still feel like I need to fight, hey, either I'm happy to you to join me. Let's go get after it. Let's change the culture back together, or do some sort of fighting. Pick up your proverbial rifle, get in the trenches somewhere that can have an effect on policies to help prepare us for the impending conflict we're going to be facing. It's not over with. So I think that's to finish that question here, which was great. I'm glad you asked it. It is playing a big part in why my generation is probably going to be pulled back, or at least be influenced to do some form of selfless service again in that regard, because we're not going to have enough younger kids who understand just what the calling means to be selfless in their service, and what it means to actually join the military outside of maybe getting some college money and a free room and board. Really joining because there's this drive inside you as an American to understand that regardless of how imperfect she is, she's still our great country that we live in, that we were born into. We were blessed to be born into. When others weren't. There's a requirement and a responsibility to preserve that. to honor the legacy of those in the past. We have the 80th anniversary of World War II and D-Day coming up. We have to honor the legacy of the past, of what they fought so hard and died for to give us now. Do you want that for your children and grandchildren? Well, you got to do something now. It's not going to happen later. You're not going to play your video games and be on social media and then one day wake up and go, okay, now can I do something, when you don't have what it is that we have fought so hard to defend it and provide you here. And you can burn the flag and hate us and talk all the crap you want to. We died and defended. A lot of us died and defended that for your right to do that. But if you want that to be prolonged, I would challenge the younger generation to go, maybe it's time for me to be selfless and sacrifice some of my own comforts and some of my own things that I've been given and give back a little bit, even if it's for 2 years, and be a part of something greater than yourself, because it does have an impact no matter how big or small you might see it. And I think that's what's pulling me back too. And God is like, you got to go back and do something to stimulate some movement, which is why I have these conversations with guys like you and people that I know out in the world. It's because maybe it will spark some form of like, maybe I should do that. And I'm hoping it does. But at this point, it's like, and my next step might be go and do a TED Talk about it, and share with people, hey, if you want to preserve this, it's time to be selfless, not selfish. And we live in a hyper selfish world, and that's going to be that's another battle I think we're facing, that we have to have more conversations around and get more veterans like at my age group to speak out against that and really inspire younger generations that might be on the fence, that are being persuaded by their peers to go the other way when they might be feeling like this calling internally to actually still serve. And I think if we can get the toxicity out of the conversation, we might be able to stave off the degradation of the United States in the military and actually get us back on track.
Well, I know your schedule's busy these days, but if you ever knock the dust off your podcast, I think you've got a lot to talk about there.
That's a good point.
It would make for a great show.
I appreciate that.
Not trying to plant seeds and put more work on your plate, but it might be a message worth pursuing.
It's not dead, because it's got the whiskey element, and I've got contacts that could help me out and get some whiskey sponsors, because I like to buy my guests like you bottles of whiskey to have them on the show. So we'll see. Right. If I go back in the military, get a uniform on, get to my duty station, I might fire it back up, have active military guys come on the show, we'll sip a little whiskey on the weekend, kind of do it that way. So
that would be really cool. That would be great.
Yeah.
Well, Wylie, I'm glad this came together. I know last week we were battling through the unexpected, but here we are again. We made this work, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time to join me. For those out in the Bomb Squad that have joined us throughout the evening, or maybe catching this on replay, how do you recommend they get in touch with you and learn more all about you and what you're up to these days and in the past and in the future?
Yeah. I got my website, WylieMcGraw.com. I'm actually writing a blog about this whole path right now. So I'm going to share some real intimate feelings and insights about what it is that I'm doing and why I'm doing it, a little bit more expanding on what we talked about tonight. So WylieMcGraw.com, that'll be up probably within the month as well. But there's different stuff in there that people can read about the work, my philosophy, the way I think, on how I look at the world. But also, I have a profile on Twitter or X, whatever it's called nowadays, at Wylie McGraw. And the reality is I just like to have good conversations with good people and see where it leads from there. So there's no expectations.
And lots of great podcast interviews for you to check out as well, in case this one wasn't enough.
And Jason, it's so gracious and you're so gracious on being able to do, great work for me on the show notes and in the summaries and really helping me kind of tighten that up a little bit too. So I definitely like coming to you for that. So if people need someone to do it for them, you're definitely the guy I trust and rely on. So thank you for that. But I have Wise Words and Whiskey with Wylie McGraw as well. The conversations there are all about high performance living too.
Excellent. Well, Bomb Squad, thank you so much for checking out tonight's live stream with Mr. Wylie McGraw. Hope you had as much fun as I did. I'll toast you once again, my friend, even though I am empty. I'm going to pour a little bit more as we do our post-show wrap-up as we sign off here. But for those in the viewing audience, this was a special Tuesday edition. You're getting a doubleheader this week. I'll be back tomorrow night with Mr. Mark Ronick right here. Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, or bombtrackmedia.com/live, and you can access that episode. So, on behalf of Mr. Wylie McGraw, I am Jason Cercone, host of Let's Blow This Up Live, and until our paths cross again, stay explosive. See you next time.